So we'll start off with a UBE. That's all it's going to do for now, just so I can illustrate some points, is go through the list of address book entries. Okay, and it's not going to do any processing right now. All it's going to do is output it. So a UBE, similar to an interactive application, is backed by is backed by a business view. So you attach a business view to a section, then that section gets processed record at a time, and you can do some processing, like updating of some data in the system, and you can also output to um, the. It's got an output engine where it's like it can do some processing and it's also a report. So anytime you do a report in JDE, it's done through a UBE. You can have a UBE that has zero output but does some processing in the system as well. And the difference between an interactive application and a UBE or a batch application is it runs in batch and it's not really something that a user interacts with. The only thing that a user does is it starts it off. It launches the job, okay? And then the job runs in the background and does its thing. So that's the difference. Okay, so I'm gonna create something called let's say R55 test for now. It's gonna be backed by an existing here, an existing business view. So let me just check this business view, see what it's got in it. Okay, so basically it's got F0101. F0101 is the address book. Okay, it's the address book master, so it lists every single entry that we have in the in an address book. And an address book could contain suppliers, customers, employees. So you have an entry there, I have an entry there. We're set up as a. This is the biggest one used to kind of separate the types of entries that are in there is search type. So search type C is for customers, search type E is for employees, search type for us it's VS for vendor supplier. It's a supplier. So I'm going to use this business view and I'm going to just loop through them. And for now, all I'll do is I'm going to display it and then I'm going to build on it just to show you like the different sections and all right. So I'm not changing this, I'm just using it. So first thing we do is create a batch application. I'm going to name it F55 test 01 for now. I'm just going to call it demo. Address book UBE demo. Okay, first thing you want to do, okay, is there's a no update report and an update report. I never, ever, ever limit myself by putting no update report. Even if I'm not doing any updating, I'll always select update report. Always. Because even if you're doing no updating now, if in the future you want to do some updating, you can't go back and change this. So I don't even know why they have that option. If you this it'll prevent you from doing any updating. If you try and do like a F0101 update or if you try and do those things, it's not going to let you. Update on what? The data in the system. So this because for okay, so this UBE runs on a on a business view. Okay. For that business view, you can write code. Okay. So let's say what I wanted this application to do was when you run it, every record that you get that gets selected or every record that it gets processed, I want it to update the search type from a whatever it is now to a C. Okay. So if that was the intention of my application, yeah. If I do not, so what I would do would be for every record, update that record, right? Yeah. If I set it to a no update report, if I try to do an update, I won't be able to. Oh, okay. Because we can use the report Yes, exactly. A report. It's not a report. It's a batch application. That they call it report, but don't think of it as report. That's why it starts with R. They call it report, but really what it is, it's a batch application that can be used to generate a report if you want to. Okay, so what this could say is no update batch application, update batch application. You could think, but think of a report, UBE, batch application. They're all the same thing. It's this engine here. Okay, and this option is meant for, this is really a report. It's not going to update anything in the system. It's just generating some data and displaying it to you. Whereas this is going to say, no, I'm doing some sort of update in the system, some sort of processing in the system, and I'm going to update some data in the system. I'll never ever choose this option because even if right now it's just a report, why limit yourself for the future? Let's say in 6 months from now, oh, this report is the perfect report to be used, and all I need to do is update to another table because I want to know what was processed, for example. Like for example, let's say I wanted to run through it, and I have a table that stores the last time this was run. Okay, so at the beginning, the requirements were I just show me the report, and I say no update report. So I build the report, it's all working fine. Then 6 months later, they say, hey, I want this to report to run, but I don't want it to run if it ran yesterday. So if it got missed, or I want it to run um, based on some data in the system. So if the report was run 3 weeks ago, then run it again. Okay. So if you weren't managing that with the scheduler and you ran the report, you need to log at the end of this. When was the last time this was run? Where are you going to log it? You're going to log it in the database. How do you update the database? You need to update the database. You do an insert or an update into the database. If I say this is a no update report, I will not be able to insert any data or update any data in the database. So that's why I'll never choose this option. I'll always choose update because if I choose this, I don't limit myself. I make it so that if I don't do any updates, well, I just don't do any updates. Exactly, read only. Read only. So I'll never make it, even if I'm only reading, I will still make it a read write report for flexibility. Okay, so create that, go to design tools, and you're using the report design aid instead of the interactive application design aid, or the form design aid, what they call it. Okay, so you can only have one of these open at a time. So do I need to save this? Okay, so when I clicked start report design aid, what happened there is you already had one open. It just showed you the one that was open. It didn't open the one that I'm trying to open. Because you can only have one open at the same time. So now I closed it. Now it's going to open this one here. It's going to be blank. Okay, so first thing it asks is like a little wizard. These things you can always add or change after, okay? But it's default to a page header. A page header is just a special, these two are special sections, okay? The page header is something that is going to repeat itself on every single page. Okay? Report header is something that is put at the top of the report only one time, and it doesn't repeat itself on every single page. So depending on the type of report you build, you might want to have a page header, you might want to have a report header, you might want to have both, you might want to not have any at all, but you can always add these things after. This is just the initial wizard. Okay. Next thing is the section. Okay. This is the wizard that's asking you what type of section do you want. There's 3 types of sections that you can create. And I'm not going to get into tabular right now because tabular, one, I very rarely use it. I don't think I've ever used it. And I don't really, I think I used it once. And I don't know enough about it right now. Like I'd have to research it again when I do the processing. So I won't talk about that one for now. Talk about columnar and group. Those are the two that I use the most. Um, columnar. Uh, Actually, I'll talk about it when I generate. When I'm in the design, I'll talk about those because it'll be easier visually. So similar to a report header and a page header, you have a page footer and a report footer. A footer that you want to display on every page and a footer that you display at the very end of the report. So initially, I'm going to design this as a report. All I'm going to do is go through the data in an address book, and I'm going to output that data. So I'm going to set it to columnar for now. And it's asking me for a business view. What business view do you want to tie to this section? So I never choose this. I'll always choose this just because I know what business view I want. So I'm going to say I'm going to pick it myself. Which business view? And say V550101. So this is the business view that's looking at the table F0101. I'll very rarely fill these sections out unless I know right away offhand how I want to lay out my things. This is kind of like a wizard that is saying what column do you want first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and it'll kind of like put it there for you on the report. But if you just put nothing here, you could in the design you can choose. You have control over where you put things. So very rarely do I put any section layout. Data sequencing is how you want the data sequenced. It's not a group by. It's a sort order by. Order by.
Okay, so order by ID, and
Within that ID, then the next level.
item number, name,
Yeah,
and within that name, you can order by anything else.
exactly.
Okay, so the sections of order bys.
It's not well. It's like just like an SQL order by. First, you're ordering by one thing, and then within that, you're ordering by something else, and then within that, in the next level. So that's what is very important with. I'm not going to go into the crazy detail of that now, but data sequencing very often in a batch application, you want to do some processing at a break point. Okay, and a break point is when something changes.
Okay.
So, for example, a breakpoint could be you're running through a list of records in an address book. You're going to sort them by search type. So you're going to process all the customers first. Then you're going to process the employees, right? Because you're sorting by search type. So all the C's will be happened, and the E's, and then the D's, and whatever. You could then put a breakpoint to say when you're finished processing the customers and you get to the employees, when that field changes, that's a breakpoint. Okay, so when that field changes, do something. So maybe you want to, I don't know. In this case, maybe I want to show on the report. I want to show the total number of customers processed, and then basically you'll have a record for every single customer, and then at the breakpoint, which is like a sub total type of thing, you're going to have the total number of customers processed. Then it'll list the employees. Then after the employees are finished, it's going to list total number of employees. So very often data sequencing is used because processing of the application requires certain things to happen when breakpoints happen. Okay, so you'll don't worry too much about that right now, but just keep in mind that data sequencing and breakpoints are linked together, and it triggers an event. A breakpoint triggers an event that you want to happen when something changes, and when something changes when the data changes inside. So it's it can be thought of as like a logic in a group by, sort of. Okay, but this is very common, and you'll see this in any reporting environment. Okay, if you use Crystal Reports, it's the same idea. Crystal Reports is a Microsoft. Well, it used to be Microsoft. I don't know if it's still Microsoft. It actually used to be SAP. I don't know who it is. It's a reporting environment that has logic that can be kicked off at breakpoints. BI Publisher, same thing. BI Publisher is an Oracle product. It all has to do with reporting. So you have some data that repeats itself because you're dealing with tables here, right? Tables, it repeats itself a lot of times, the data inside of it. When certain of those fields change, you can trigger a break. And you can either trigger some sort of logic to happen, or you can trigger some sort of output to happen at those breakpoints. And data sequencing is important for the breakpoints. And it's important because let's say I weren't sorting by search type. Say I sorted by address number, so I would have a customer, an employee, a customer, an employee, a customer, an employee. Okay. If I put a breakpoint on that search type, what that means is I'm gonna trigger some logic when that search type changes. So if I don't sort it by search type, it's gonna change. Every record is gonna change. You might have one or two, luckily, like one, you'll have a customer, an employee. You're gonna trigger some logic. A customer, an employee. Trigger some logic because it's changing from a C to an E,
Okay.
back to a C. So normally you want to sort by your breakpoints because you want to process all the C's and then when those C's change from a C to an E, trigger a breakpoint. So for now, I'll just sort by search type just to set myself up for later when I'm going to show you the breakpoints. I won't even put this for now. Okay, this is where you tell it what types of breaks you're going to have in your application. I'm not even going to put that for now. Next thing is the data selection. So every report has, or batch application has data selection. So by default, if you don't put any data selection, what's going to happen is whatever data is in your view, it's going to run for all of that data. So pretty much it's going to run for all of that table. So right now my view is V550101 and my backing table is F0101. F0101 has, I don't know how many records, I don't know, maybe 60,000 records or 10,000 records. So if I run this job without any data selection, it's going to run for all of those records. Okay, so normally sometimes it's fine, but 99% of the time you're going to have some sort of data selection that you put on this stuff. Because, for example, you would say, someone would say, build me a report to show me all of the sales that happened in the last week. You're going to put the business view on the sales file, but you're going to data select based on last week. You're not gonna show the entire sales history file for the last 10 years. So that's what the data selection is. Okay. So for now, I'm not gonna put anything because what it does initially is it takes you through a wizard, but all of this stuff I'm gonna show you after the wizard. Um, a interactive application doesn't absolutely need a version to run it.
Yes.
Okay, you can build one if you want, but you don't have to.
Yes.
A batch application requires a version. Even if you don't have any data template, a processing option template, that's the way it's made. You cannot run a UBE, you run the version of the UBE.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I usually never create it right away. I'm just going to say, no, I'll create my version later. Okay. So it starts off by creating that section, the columnar section that I told it that I wanted. And you can see it's a columnar section. So a columnar section behaves this way. When I add a field, you see that it places it one beside the other. Like that. Okay, I'm going to create another section, and this time I'm going to create, instead of a columnar section, we create a group section. These are the three different types of sections you can create. I'm going to create a group section. I'm going to create it using the same business view. It's taking me through the wizard again because I'm adding a new section. Okay, so now I have two sections, same business view.
Yeah.
I'm going to add now this column here. I see the difference in the way it reacts.
Yeah.
I could put this stuff wherever I want.
Ah, okay. I see.
Okay. I could have like a report that looks like, like this. I have some data here, like that, and then maybe I have some data coming this way. I have complete control over how I design that. Whereas columnar is very simple. Okay. It's just columns of data. 99.99999% of the time, I'm always using group. Okay, because you can accomplish this with a group and you don't limit yourself. Now I'm limiting myself. Whereas here, I have complete control. If I want to design it as a columnar, I could still design it as a columnar.
Question: in the columnar design, the header repeats itself?
That a columnar, to accomplish a columnar in a group section, you need a special type of section that you add a page. This one here. A level break header. So anyway, I'll show you how that works. Okay. You can have either a level break header or you can have a this reacts a certain way. Okay, and if you don't want it to react that way because you don't want to repeat the header after every break, let's say, and you want to repeat it only on a page break, there's ways of doing that as well. You can create yourself, for example, a page header, okay, and put the page header here, and then you could just disconnect this data here. This is actually the way that you would normally do it.
Yes.
And you would just take this, put it here.
Oh, you created the page header.
Yeah, create a page header.
Yeah.
And then I would put my data like this.
Yes.
So I'm basically what I'm doing is I'm creating a columnar. This is exactly like a columnar they're gonna react.
Yes, yes.
Right? So I take the header out of the actual section that repeats itself, and I put it on a page header instead.
But this one doesn't repeat?
No, that one doesn't repeat. The runtime takes care of it for you.
This one does. Okay.
Yes, this one will.
That's why you detach it and you have to move it to
Yeah, exactly. So this one is managed by the runtime. The runtime knows it's a columnar section. Don't repeat this every single time.
Something fast and
really quick, you could do it.
Seconds,
Yeah.
View, here's the report.
Okay, but generally I'm always choosing this because this I can create this and I can have some flexibility and you can't once you choose your section, you can't change it now. I can't change this from a columnar to something else. And I don't know if you've noticed, but if I got some event rules in here, okay, that are specific to, and they're not the variables that I define in these events, okay, are not global variables. They're not report variables. Then if I copy them and paste them into another section, in an event in another section, all those local variables here do not get copied. So you got to basically write your code again or fix up your code, like copy, paste, and fix all the issues. So that's why I always go with this section, because if I want to change it, the way it looks, I can always change the way it looks, and I don't have to change my code. Okay, that's the reason that I do that. Okay, so let's just get rid of this for now. So to remove a section, actually, let me touch on one other point before. Normal sections, which is the sections I create here, section, create, either group or columnar, or tabular, will process the order in which they appear in the report.
Ah,
Okay? So,
from top to bottom.
from top to bottom, if they're added this way, I'll show you. There's a lot of, you'll see a lot of sections.
Added or the
No, they
the way
can,
they
no,
look?
no, no, the way they look.
Okay.
Okay? So, if I have, for example, in this report, I have two business views. Okay? And sorry, I have two sections pointing to the same business view with no data selection in any of them. What that's going to do is it's going to run through the address book record by record, okay, once,
Yes.
then it'll start over again, record by record again,
Okay.
okay? So you could, in a report, have multiple sections with different views, right? Run through this set of data, run through this set of data, run through this set of data. You can do all of that,
Yes.
okay? So the data selection, should I get into that now? No, I won't get into that now. Okay, so for now, I'm just going to destroy this section. I'm going to get rid of it. So to delete a section, you highlight you select the section, you section, instead of create, you do destroy. So that just removes the entire section. Be careful when you do that because you lose everything. You lose your code, your visual, everything. So make sure you want to, you're for sure want to delete that. So let's do exactly what a columnar section would do. I'm going to create myself a page header. And auto create, what it does is it creates these special fields for you. The name of the report,
Ah, okay.
the page number, puts like there's a special column. Okay, it's a runtime column called page number. So
Mm-hmm.
it'll manage the page numbering for you.
If you delete those ones and you want them back,
You can create them here, runtime fields.
okay.
Okay,
Okay.
those runtime fields are
You just
page number, page n of total, company title. Those are all the runtime fields. You don't have to populate them. The runtime will populate them for you.
okay. But if
Okay.
you delete this one,
Yeah. So this one here,
it's gonna pop back.
this one here is page number, runtime page number. So if I want to put in page number, it's this one here.
Ah, okay.
It's the same one. Now I have it twice. So
Okay.
if I delete this one, I can it'll actually show twice, right? It'll show, but I can delete this one and use this one. Okay. So that's the auto create. Normally I don't really do that. I do create myself a page header section only. It just creates the section, and then it's up to me to put whatever I want on there.
Uh-huh.
Now, if you know you're going to put most of those fields, do that. But me, I usually like full control, so I usually just
Yeah.
do everything myself.
Okay. Meaning you
But
add those one towards the end.
yeah, that's it. I will add them when I need them. So in this case, I don't want that. Okay, I don't want that type of output. So columnar, okay, is the intention behind columnar is to have. Usually, it was to have. Okay, let me go step back. The output engine of a batch application can output to two formats.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, three formats, but let's start with two:
Yeah.
PDF and Excel or CSV.
Mm-hmm.
So a columnar section is perfect for a CSV. A group section is not perfect for a CSV because it's more meant for a PDF type of output. You could, if you want, export that, even that, to a CSV if you wanted to, but it wouldn't come out properly. So normally what you do when you want the CSV output is you do the what I was saying before, the let's say I'm just going to display address number and name and search type. Okay, so whatever I place here is what's going to be output. I'm going to disconnect these and I'm going to put those in my page header. Okay, and that's the address number.
Do you use the self, the auto? No.
I'll show you in a second, okay? So there's one important thing that you need to do when you're doing a CSV output is you have to set the vertical spacing to something. I think it's 52. Um, Hang on, let's just Google that real quick. Here. Set the horizontal grid alignment to 52 units and snap to grid. Okay, snap to grid.
Yeah.
I'll show you what it does after. But you set the horizontal alignment to 52. Okay, so look at that I did. Set the unit to 52.
Okay.
That is the setting that it needs if you want to make this a CSV output, because what it's going to do is it's going to take your data that's within this, starts here, and it's going to output it to the first column. Then the data here. If you, for example, have this, not snap to grid, I put my data there. There's a chance that this gets overwritten by this data because it's in the same column.
Okay.
So you need to start it here.
Mm-hmm.
So snap to grid is exactly what it's doing. Snap to grid is snapping, right, to those unit points. Okay, so if I want this as a CSV output, I'm going to snap that to the grid, snap that to this one. So that's my first, that's my second, that's my third. They overlap.
It's okay.
It's okay as long as this is going to be CSV output. If this is intended to be PDF output, that's going to overlap in your PDF output. So what my point is that if you're a lot of reports that you do are going to be CSV because a lot of people they want their stuff in Excel. Sometimes you're going to have PDF, but a lot of times the majority of them are going to be more Excel based. Okay, so the majority of the time you're going to set your horizontal spacing to 52 and you're going to snap to grid and you're going to create your report this way. Okay, if you create a columnar section, the same holds true. Same holds true. When I create this, if I want this to be a CSV output,
Mm-hmm.
I need to make this thing inside this thing here.
Okay.
Okay? Otherwise, again, you're gonna have problems. Your output's
But
not gonna work
this
properly.
this one here.
This one can
No,
go out.
this one should.
This one should be right here.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And so that oftentimes I'm doing that. When you're like, see, I can't get that now. I gotta move that down. Right? And if I have something to do here, some event rules or some properties,
Okay, so you put them like
you put them there. Yeah, but then you put them back.
you have to put it back.
Yeah. Maybe I don't know if you do.
Okay.
I don't know. But so here you control everything by where it starts, where the data starts in a group section for a CSV. Whereas a columnar section, you control it by how big the column is, the size of it. Okay, and here I can't change the size of this. Well, I can change the display size here, but it
On the columnar, if you put it on two, it's gonna cut it in two.
if you put this on two, it's going to skip a cell. So this CSV is going to be empty, the cell here, and your next column is going to have some data, and you don't want that. No, you want your data unless you intentionally want it, right? But most of the time you don't want that.
And here too. If you
Here too, the same thing. If I put my thing here, I'm going to have an empty one over here.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that is CSV output. PDF output, as you see it, is how you're going to get it. So if I generate this and I generate a PDF, I'm gonna get my data is gonna overlap it. So if this were a PDF output, I probably don't want to snap it, and I could keep my horizontal spacing to 50. Usually I keep it to 52,
Okay.
but that depends on where you want those lines, and then you put it where now it's not snapping, right? And I put it exactly where I want it.
It's not snapping now?
No, not snapping. Look, I can move it here. See, it's not like
Ah, okay.
it's not snapping.
Okay, yeah, yeah. And those lines, those dotted lines, how do you get them?
Well, they're always there, but the default is 8, 8.
Ah, okay.
Okay,
Okay.
so if I change my grid alignment to my horizontal grid alignment, which is this grid alignment, 52, I, I see that it gets bigger. So that's kind of one unit. And that's just used if you want to like align things along those horizontal or vertical axis.
And it's easier.
Eh?
It's easier to.
Yeah, it's easier to align and visualize. Like let's say I want to like align everything. I can align them super easily. Like I can just go like that.
That's
They're
true.
aligned,
Yes.
right? Um, but you have control over what's your measurement, 52, 42, 8, whatever.
So usually you keep it 52.
Usually I keep it 52, and if it's a PDF output, I'll won't snap it to the grid, and I'll just place it exactly where I want it. And if I want to align things, I you can use the alignment. Where is it? Here, align. Okay, so I can highlight all these things, and I can align them across their left edges, their right edges. So I'll say left edges. Now they're aligned. Okay, and I thought there was toolbar for alignment, layout toolbar. So that is the same thing here. Usually I have that enabled. So that is left align, right align, center align, top, all that stuff. Okay, so let's say we're building a CSV output. Gonna do this. So I got my address number, my alpha name, my search type, and this is my address number, my alpha name, and my search type. Save. So I'm gonna remove this section, destroy. So now what it's gonna do is it's gonna run through every single record in the address book, and it's going to output the number and the name. Let me just see.
You have one subscriber from Brazil.
Do I? 13,000, almost 14,000 records. So that's going to take quite a bit of time to run, especially locally on your machine, because it's not a lot of CPU. So for this demo, I'm going to just limit that to a few records. Okay. So there's two ways you can do data selection: in code and the user. For now, I'm going to have the user selected. So that's all that's needed right now. I have no code. All it's going to do is it's going to run through all those records, and it's going to output the address number, the name, and the search type for every single record that we have in the table. So part one is done. The report is built. Now I can't run that report. There's no way I can run this thing. There's no option here to run it.
Sure.
I need a version. Okay, so I'll create a version, batch version, R55 test, was it one? Hang on, R55 test 01. So it's saying when you create a version, what's the batch application that I'm tying this to? R55 test 01. Okay, and it's saying what's the name of the version? Here it's our standard is SF001, 002, right? And I'm just gonna say you need to give it a version number and a name. So I'm just gonna say I don't know, Address book demo. Okay, so when I run this now, it asks me two things. You can, remember you saw the data, the sequencing,
Yeah.
and you also saw the data selection.
Yes.
So you can specify the data selection and sequencing, and you can have the user override that. So that's exactly what I'm doing here. When I run this and I don't choose anything here, it's going to run for every single record. But if I choose data selection, this is what the user will see, except it'll be in a web client instead of the
Oh,
fat
they will.
client.
The user will see
The
this.
user, not you have, there's ways you can prevent them from seeing this, and
Yes.
but a lot of times, yes, they're going to see the data selection.
Okay.
So they're going to basically see this. So they're going to say, how do I want to filter my data? So you give them the ability to filter their data.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you can prevent them from doing that. Sometimes you want to say, hey, this has to be this data sequence. I can't let you, sorry, data selection. I can't let a user change it. There's ways you can do all of that.
Okay.
Okay, but for now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to show you that I'm going to limit this report to running on address book number is equal to. I'm just going to list a few. So there's single value, range of value, and list of values. Okay, it's a little weak in my opinion. I should be able to come over here to the list of values and copy and paste from Excel, or I can't. I gotta enter one by one. A lot of times people they have like, for example, I gotta reprint 600 invoices. I gotta resend them to Amazon. They want a 600 invoices proof of invoice. I need to do it in the system. They ask me, how do I do that? I say, well, you gotta come over here. You gotta say invoice number where invoice number equals and put in a list of values. But you can't copy and paste that list of values. You got to enter every invoice number, enter, invoice number, enter. So it's a little weak.
But you could have like a business function that retrieves.
Well, you could, but you have to build all that. But you have to. Usually, these types of requests they come because they need something and they need it
Yeah.
fast, and you're not going to go in and start building this whole application that stores the. But you can do that. You can do all that stuff, but there's a lot of development involved in it. You should be able to, in my opinion,
Yes.
right?
Put
Just
a.
be able to just paste something in there, right? But you can't. You have to have 5068, 5067, let's say. Enter. You just got to keep entering numbers in there. So I'm right now I'm saying where my address number is that or that. It's like an in. It's
Yeah.
basically what it is. It's an in.
It is an in.
It translates to an in. Where ABAN8 is in 5067 5068.
That's good.
Okay? So that in, what's ugly about it is you have to paste. I mean, if you have 5, 5, 10, whatever, it's not so bad. But if you have like hundreds, it becomes a nuisance for a user. So that's a bit of a weakness I find on the runtime. But I have no control over that. That's the tools. So when they say JD Edwards, when they say there's the application release and the tools release, okay, this is part of the tools release. So when they make their tools better, these are the types of things they would make better
Okay.
in their tools release. And I have no control over the tools release programming.
Oh.
I can program in the application release.
Yeah.
I can program programs given the tool set that's provided to me in the tools release. So that's just a note on the difference between application and tools release. Okay, so let's say I run it on those customers, 4 customers. I click OK, click OK. Now, for now, I'm going to export this to CSV. Okay, because if I do on screen, let me actually, you know what? Let me do on screen first.
Yeah.
You're gonna see. You're not connected. I
Connected to.
think you've been idle for too long. Let me. I'll log in. Okay, so it's gonna run that on screen, and you're gonna see PDF output.
Mm-hmm.
You see, it's overlapping,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So I'm gonna run that
So
again.
on screen, even if you
Well,
decide CSV,
users don't see that. Okay, it's only because it's running locally. Okay, users won't see that. You have control. I'll show you after. Over, you kind of build the report initially for a. Sorry. The engine can generate a PDF and an Excel. Sorry, a CSV. You as the developer really got to pick which one is optimal. You can design your report to look good on both outputs if you want to.
oh, okay, I understand.
Okay, and then you'll be able to run the report, and then you can even say, hey, this one I want CSV, this one I want PDF. Okay, but generally you don't do that because it's very hard to have it look good on both CSV and PDF. But you have some, there's very few that I've done like that.
Mm,
Okay, most of the time as a developer, I'm choosing as a developer speaking with the client. We're deciding on what type of output do you want. Do you want PDF or do you want Excel?
okay.
Excel usually is the popular choice because they can filter their data more after. They can put their own calculations in there. They can manipulate the data afterwards in their
You
report.
can print it as a PDF.
And you can print it as a PDF. And so PDF is usually more things like packing slips and invoices that we send and pick slips. So if you look here in the in our submitted jobs, I'm gonna look for an example of an invoice that was sent. Okay, so example, this is an order acknowledgement. As a PDF.
Ah, okay.
Okay, it's an invoice that we send to our client. All right. Another one would be the pick slip. Actually, the output is not this one. It's this one. Okay, so this is today. This is going to be changed by our WMS system, where you're not going to require a paper anymore. But today, because we are paper, we still do it with paper. This is what tells the guys in the warehouse what do they pick. What do I go and pick in the aisles? It's PDF based. Okay, but a lot of times, so those kind of reports are kind of pretty much built, right? I've built them all already.
Mm-hmm.
The major things that come up now are like that people want to see some like a more analysis type reports.
Mm-hmm.
Analysis reports are going to be usually they preferred in CSV. So generally, you want to know upfront, is this thing going to be a CSV or is it going to be a PDF? Then you design the report inside the actual design. You design it for that type of output,
Okay.
and then this thing, like I said, can generate both. It's just that you have to choose CSV all the time because that's if you choose PDF, it's not going to look good. Okay, so I'm going to generate that, and this time I'm going to say export to CSV, and it's going to launch. It generates a CSV file and it launches your default CSV viewer.
Mm-hmm.
So yours is Open Office.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's not Excel.
Uh,
Start recovery. This was probably. Do you need to recover this?
no.
So this is, I'm not really familiar with it, but it's detecting that it's a CSV. This is your open office that's doing this. Generally Excel, it just opens. Okay, but I'm just gonna click OK, and you're gonna see it put everything like this. The name is not there for some reason. Didn't This didn't parse it properly. Let's set your default. Oh, I know why. You don't have Excel installed on your. We should install Excel on your development client. I probably suffer the same problem. But the point is, okay, it doesn't matter how the client
Yeah.
outputs it. This thing, okay, is going to go into C, E910. Or a lot of times you'll see E900, print queue. Every job you run goes into your print queue. So your print queue lists all of the batch applications that run.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if I look at the date modified, I'm going to see first I ran it in PDF,
Yeah.
then I ran it as CSV.
Okay.
If I look at this actual data in Notepad, all it is a CSV file.
Okay.
Okay, and it's just comma separating, and it's the CSV output is good.
Mm-hmm.
What wasn't good was your client wasn't parsing it properly. So when I actually open this in Open Office, I need to say my separator is a comma, right? So now it's gonna open it properly.
Okay.
But Excel, okay, it'll do that automatically.
Mm-hmm.
It's automatically a comma. It's automatic. The standard is kind of already taken care of for you.
Yeah. But now it knows. When you open
Does it? I think it asks every time. Yeah, but it defaults to I guess the last time you opened it.
it's always going to this setup page. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That's some setup for Open Office. I don't really know. The point is that it doesn't generate Excel output.
Yeah.
It generates CSV output with zero formatting. It's just text it's outputting. And then users usually open that in Excel and add some formulas, and then they save it as an Excel, not as CSV, if they do some sort of manipulation to it. Okay, so that shows kind of the basic. Now there's zero code that I wrote there, so it shows the basic of how the processing works. Um, in here, this repeats for every record. You have events that you can run or that you can write code to that follow similar process to that which you have here on your paper. Okay. The ones that are heavily used, okay, the most often used is the do section.
Mm-hmm.
The do section is the one it's gonna run for every record
Of the view.
of the view. Okay, for every record that gets hit, it's gonna run. So let's have an example here. Let's say, okay, similar to an interactive application where you have business view columns and you have data dictionary columns and that you put into a grid.
Yeah.
And when you put something into a grid,
Yeah.
every single row, every single record of that business view will get displayed in that grid. If you select a business view column, the runtime takes care of populating that value for you. Exactly the same thing in a UBE, because a UBE is record based all the time. It's always going through records of a business view. If I this here is my business view browser, my business view column browser.
Okay.
This here is my data dictionary browser.
Okay.
So it's the same similar concept.
Chip up the
It's in here. View, and you have these two here.
okay.
Okay? So usually I have them set up like this. Where is it? Yeah, like this.
Okay.
and I usually gonna go like this. Okay, so um, it's exactly the same concept. If I take some data, let's say I wanted to, I don't know, something simple. I'm gonna hard code something. Okay, I wanted to hard code something into a description. So let's say DSC, no, DL01. Take a description field. I'm gonna put it here in the fourth column. Disconnect, cut, paste that up here. It's gonna be my fourth column. This, I'm gonna call it hard coded value. Whatever. Doesn't make much sense right now. I just kind of illustrate my point. I'm gonna put that there. That, because it's from the data dictionary, it's not gonna have any value in it. But if I take something that's from the table, see if I look at here, it's no table. Whereas this one is from the address book master, F0101. So the runtime automatically is gonna populate this with whatever value is in that record that it's running. Okay? So in your do section, you have access to BC columns and, forget that for now, RV columns. BC is exactly like like an interactive application. The record that's getting processed will have the value in that variable. So I just ran through 4 records because I did data selection for 4 records. If I output this here, I'm going to get 5068, 5067, 4255, 4257, the ones that I data selected. And that do section is going to run 4 times because it's running on 4 records. If the RV, okay, here are the variables here. So anything that's not linked to a business column and you add here is an RV variable. Okay, it's a report. They call it the report variable. It's like a GC. It's very similar to a grid column.
Okay, but the RV comes from the data dictionary.
Yes, same as a. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. The only difference between an interactive application and this, okay, is that in an interactive application, all of these would be grid columns.
Yeah.
Okay. In a batch application, only the ones that don't come from the business view are RV columns. Okay, that's the difference. Okay. Hang on. So you see here, I only have hard-coded value there. But if I add like all these columns in there from the business view, I don't see them. Okay.
Yeah, BCs.
If I add them all from here, now I have 2 of them. Okay. And the idea behind that, okay, is that if you add a BC here, it's going to display the value that's in the table. You can't change it. Whatever value's in the table, that's what it's going to display. If you put an RV, you have control over what to put in there. If you put it something from the data dictionary, you have control over what data is going to show in that column.
Gotcha.
So if you have, for example, something that may change depending on something, you can't grab a BC and put it in there. Okay. Grab some RV, have some logic in your do section, and output something. Okay, so for example, let's do something simple.
Like for instance, an amount. You take it from the dictionary, and you calculate it based on the.
You calculate it based on 2 other columns in your business column, and you output it there. It's a good example. So here, let's say I'm going to say if my BC address book number is equal to 5068. I'm gonna RV again is similar to GC in that whatever value you put in there is what's gonna get displayed in the report. So I'm gonna say 5068, or I'm gonna say found 5068. Okay, so the logic that I'm putting in my do section, which is going to run for every single record
Okay.
in my view, is I'm testing the current record.
Yes.
If the current record's address book number is 5068, I'm going to put found 5068 in my report variable that I just created.
The field gets populated.
It'll get populated with that. Any other record that it hits, it won't get populated. Okay? Ah, anyway,
What happened?
I did
Down
choose
the
output.
PDF.
Yeah, but you see, found 5068.
Yes.
The other ones don't have it. Okay, so that's the difference between an RV and a BC in the context of a report or a UBE. Um, you can also have variables, and similar to an interactive application, you have different scopes of a variable. So I could do some sort of calculation or something and store it in a variable. Variable, similar to an interactive application, does not get output. It's just something that you can work with. Eventually, you're probably going to do something with that variable, either updating in the database or displaying it in the report. And if you're going to display it in a report, usually what you normally, a lot of times what you see is you have a variable, you do some sort of calculation, some manipulation with that variable. At the end, you have a result. You want to display that result. So you take that variable and you pass it. You say the RV something is equal to that variable. A lot of times you see that type of thing. So let's say I have and a good example would be this. Let's say here that boolean EV01 record found. And usually what I do is I put a YN at the end, so I know it's a boolean. Okay. Now, my point was my scopes. Okay. Event scope is only on the do section. So this thing is going to get reinitialized every single record if you put it in do section. If you put it in a different section, well, whenever that section gets triggered, the event gets triggered, it reinitializes that variable. So if it had a value before, well, it's not going to have it anymore.
Section means all the record in the view.
Only if you put it in the do section, because the do section was the only event we're working with right now. Okay. So the do section gets triggered for every record in the view. But for example, an initialize section, okay, does not get triggered for every single view. So the point is that this variable, if it's an event scope, it's scoped to the event. Every time that event gets triggered, it gets reinitialized. The variable gets reinitialized. Section, okay, means that it's good for this entire section. So if I set a variable in one event, and then I will have access to it in another event, I'll have access to it in another event, and it won't get reinitialized on the events. It's like a global variable, but it's scoped to the entire section, all the events in this section. So the events could be all these. It's a shared variable amongst all of these events. Okay, but only for this section. If I have another section that I create, down here, it's not going to see those variables. So um, that's section scope. And then you have report scope. It's global, the entire thing. So whether you set it in one section, another section, whatever event, it's global, it's shared, and it's seen by everybody. So a lot of times I do use this, but most often than not, you see these in these. But they're all kind of used. I'm not going to say I never use this because I use it still like quite frequently, but more I use report and event. So for this one, I'm just going to say found record. Yes, no. I'm going to initialize it to no. So for every record, I'm going to assume I didn't find it. And if it's equal to 5068, I'm going to say I found the record. And then I'm going to say if I found the record, and this is like a really easy example, but it gives you an idea of this is not being displayed. It's just something that I'm using to work with the data. It's a variable that I'm using to determine something, but I'm not displaying that to the user. But this, depending on the value of this, in the end, after it's finished processing everything it's doing, I might display something to the user, depending on this variable. But RV gets displayed. These variables that you create over here do not get displayed. They're work variables. They don't get displayed on the output.
So only those the ones that I select from the
Either either the business view or the data dictionary, the RV. Those are going to get displayed. Everything else is just work variables. Okay. Now, a lot of times what you could do is you can have an application do some sort of batch processing. So batch processing is not just simply outputting a report. It's actually doing some processing in the system. So an example of something that I built was my upload process for weights and dimensions. You use an interactive application to enter some data into a temporary table. That temporary table, you then launch a batch application to read the data in the temporary table to go update the database where it needs to get updated. Okay? So it's not so the batch processing, okay? It shows the records that it updated. But in the background, what's happening is there's some in the do sections for every record. It's saying, go and update this table, go and update this table, go and update this table, go and update this table. So you would do that very simply over here. I have some data in the table. I can use that data to do some updates. So I can say, for every record that I run, okay, let's say I want to update, I don't know, let's say keep it simple. I want a batch application to do a mass change in the system, to update all the search types that I put in my data selection to search type C. I don't want to have a user go into every single record and change from E to C. Say there's some sort of change that happens in the company, and I want to say, okay, I want to take all of my search type CM and I want to convert them to search type C. Let's say that was some requirement that they had. Well, what I could do in here, okay, is just if okay, we have two types of customers here at SFM. We have C and CM. C are the ones that we basically have Canadian customers and US customers. We separate them by C and CM. CM are our US customers, C are our Canadian customers, and we kind of have like a virtual company. It's not really a separate company, but to the US customers, we do business out of Champlain in New York. We don't do business out of Montreal or Dorval.
Yeah.
So when they see their packing slips and when they see their invoices, they see Champlain as the origin.
Yeah.
Really, it's coming from Dorval. Okay, but we separate our customers for which are the ones, which are our U.S. client base and which are our Canadian clients. So let's say tomorrow they say, I don't want to do that anymore. Always been doing business out of Dorval.
Mhm.
I want to change all of our CM to C because there's no point in separating them anymore.
Mhm.
Now we have like, I don't know, thousands of CM customers in there.
Yeah.
So one option, I can do an SQL. It's probably the option I'd take. Okay, but I could build a batch application. Okay, and have the user choose whatever clients they want to change to C.
Mhm.
So I'm going to put a validation in there to say only do this if it's CM,
Mhm.
just to make sure if the user chooses E, it's not going to update some crap in the system, right?
Mhm.
So in there, I'm going to say if it's C, update F0101. Now what record? Update this.
Mhm.
Okay, so what this is doing is again BC address number is the where clause in the update statement,
Mhm.
and it's going to um, have the value of the currently processing record. So this, in the example of my data selection, is going to run 4 times this do,
Mhm.
right? And it's going to have 5068 the first time it runs.
Mhm.
Second time it's going to have 5067, and then the ones that I chose 4255, 4257. So I'm updating where the address book is equal to the current record being processed, and I'm going to set the address type to something. Right now, I'm just going to choose something, otherwise it won't let me save. I'm going to create myself a variable, AT1. I'm going to say new search type. New search type is going to be C, and I'm going to update this to the new search type.
Okay.
So for every single record, it's going to test. Make sure that the current record that I'm processing is a CM. If it is a CM, update it to a C because the new search type is my variables over here.
Mhm.
So that is the difference between a user has no idea. Like the point is that you you can have some output
Mhm.
and you can have some processing, and you don't have to have both. You can have one and not the other. You can have both. You can have this and not this and this and not this. It doesn't matter. This report now is gonna show you
Mhm.
the customers that got processed. And what you can do is something like this. For example, status. I'll show the user if it got updated or not. So if they select, so I'm going to say status here. So I could do something. A lot of times you'll see something like this. I'm going to inform the user what happened inside of the processing. So the output of the report is not really a report that someone is really going to want to see to analyze something. It's the output of the processing that happens. So in this case here, I'm showing the user whether or not the record that they selected got updated. So if it's CM, I'm going to update the record and I'm going to say put the status on the report to updated. But if it's not a CM, put the status to not updated. So now let's look how that's gonna work. When I run this job, I'm gonna have the user is gonna now do this part. I want to update all my CMs to C. But I'm gonna do it slowly. I'm gonna pick some address numbers. So they're gonna say 5068. Okay, let me show you. 5068. Where the heck is it? The number. Ah, what? It's not even here. Oh, here. 5068 is already a C.
Yeah.
So let's say they chose that. It's not going to get updated.
Yeah.
So it's going to tell the user not updated. Okay. So 5068. Now let me choose another one. 5067. It's already a C. It's not going to get updated.
Yeah.
Let me choose mine. Or let me choose an employee. Or you know what? A vendor. Here, let me choose this one. It's a supplier.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to update a supplier to a C. My program
Yeah.
makes sure of that because I'm making sure that if it's a CM, only do it if it's a CM.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay? So it's going to say not updated. Now let me take an actual CM client, which is this one here. Okay, so 6269 is the only record that's going to get updated. All the records are going to say not updated, not updated, not updated. So I'm giving the user, as an example, I'm giving the user feedback on the processing, what happened in the processing of all of this stuff. So I'm going to run that, export to CSV. Not updated, not updated, not updated, updated to C. Now, if I go and look at this data now in here, the address type changed to C. It was a CM before. So I did an update. Now, remember at the beginning I said if it's a not update report, if it was a non-update report, that would still say CM
Mm-hmm.
because it will not allow any updates.
Okay, okay.
This is my point of why limit yourself. Just always set it to an update, and if you don't do any updates, you just don't do any updates. Um, so that is an example of some processing that happens record by record. So do section, 90% of the time you're going to use a do section. Okay? You are also going to use a lot initialize section. So initialize section is the stuff that you're going to do only once for this data set.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. Why over here am I initializing this thing every single time?
Yeah.
I'm basically saying set this variable every time to C. C, set it to C, set it to C. I'm repeating that code. It doesn't need to be repeated 100 times, 200 times, 300 times. I don't need to, I can only, for every entry, it's always going to be a C.
Mm-hmm.
So to make this code a little bit better, I could make that variable a section variable instead. That one, this one. Make it a section variable. I could make it a report. Doesn't matter. Okay. I'm going to make it a report because it applies to the entire report. It doesn't really matter. In this particular scenario, either or would work. I'm going to make it a report. Now, when you change your variables from event, the scope of your variable,
Yeah.
you have to oh, it didn't do it. You have to go and actually click on it, click on it, click OK. Okay. A lot of times you have to do that. Otherwise, it doesn't. I know you have to do it in interactive applications. I'm pretty sure you have to do it here as well. Otherwise, it doesn't know that it's been updated.
So how do you do it again?
You have to just go in everywhere you used it. You got to re-select it.
Oh,
It's pretty dumb, but it's
okay.
you have to do that. Okay.
So
So
when you change the scope, you have to go everywhere you use it.
used it. Yeah, yeah. I know for sure that that's the case in an interactive application.
Uh,
In a batch version, not sure if you have to do
so
it or
what
not,
would
but
you
I'm
get?
pretty
You
sure
get
you'll get some in a interactive application. When you do this,
yeah.
you would get uh, remap variable or something like that. Okay, but I didn't get it here, so I don't know if you have to do it here as well. But I'm pretty sure that you do. I'm sure if I
Okay.
closed it and reopened it, I'm sure I don't know. Yeah, I would have to test it.
Okay.
Okay, but the point is, if you ever see that remap variable, it's because you've changed the scope.
Even if I close the app.
Yeah, even if you close and reopen, it's you gotta do it.
Oh,
So if you ever see the remap,
yes.
that's what it's talking about. It's because you've changed the scope, or you've deleted it and you're still using it somewhere. So you got to go wherever you're using it and remove it.
And put it back.
Like this, for example.
Okay.
If I set this variable here, new search type equal to, no, not new search, found equal to D.
Yeah.
I save that. Then I come here and I say found. I'm going to delete that variable. If I delete it, I'm still using it here,
Yeah.
but it's deleted. So when I save this, it's going to give me an error. Invalid destination for assignment. It's telling me this is invalid. And it's invalid because this doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So when I go back into it, and I can't deploy this, this gives me errors. Like if I try and deploy this thing, it's not going to run properly. See? I got to delete it.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep in mind, either when you change the scope of a variable, or if you use a variable and then delete it from here, there's things you got to do in your code to clean up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that is um, search type. Okay, so oh yeah, that's what I was doing. Okay, so now what I'm good, I changed the scope to a report, and now I'm gonna take it from here. I'm gonna move it over here.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, when this section starts running, it's gonna set this variable once
Mm-hmm.
to a C. In the do section, because it's a report variable, I have access to it, and it's going to use that C on every update.
Mm-hmm.
So initialize is commonly used when you want to run logic for an entire data set
Mm-hmm.
or an entire section once before it's processed. So a lot of times you're using initialize, runs once. Do runs for every record. End runs after. So you have before,
Mm-hmm.
run once.
Yeah.
Do run for every record. End run after you're finished processing all your records.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the kind of the most common ones that are used. The other ones are used. They're still used. I'm not going to say they're not used at all. They are used, but I'm not going to get into them right now because you can get away with like 90% of the time I'm not using the rest. Okay,
Yeah.
so those are the most important ones to think about.
Yes.
But there are scenarios where you're going to need to use the other ones as well, and that's where you can use this. Okay, I will never. Okay, my personally never. I never use this.
Mm-hmm.
I hate it.
In
Okay,
object, do object.
because what happens here, okay, is this init object, do object, and end object happens for um happens for uh, a variable that's on there.
Okay.
So it'll run for every single column that you put on here. So
Mhm.
I could have some logic tied to this variable.
Mhm.
And it says object here, but it's initialize column, do, and end.
Mhm.
Okay? And the same thing for each of these. I never, ever, ever use that.
Okay. For each
For
of
each
the.
column that's in there, you can do some sort of logic. I will always put my logic pertaining to this stuff in my do section.
Okay. But in interactive, I use that. We use that.
Interactive, you can use it more for like fast feedback on columns,
Yeah.
but generally I stay record based instead of column based.
Yeah.
Generally,
Yeah.
interactive applications you're going to use it more. Yes.
Yeah.
In
Especially when you have headless forms, you use it a lot.
okay, and then okay, hang on. The other ones I'm not going to get into right now.
No.
Okay, so they're more advanced, but we'll get into them in another one. Okay, a few more topics, maybe another 20 minutes. Um, what I want to show is when you double click on the section, or when you right click on the section, you can. What I was doing was before was going into event rules, and you have all your event rules for that section. You also have your data sequencing and your data selection.
Mhm.
Your data sequencing is what I was showing you before.
Mhm.
Let's say this report didn't do an update. Okay, I'm going to change it back to what it was before. I'm going to remove all this, and let's pretend it's not an update report anymore. Now it's just displaying some records they want to know how many clients they have of a certain type. What I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and define my data sequencing. My data sequencing, I'm going to say sequence by search type. Okay. Now, when I run this, it's going to do order by search type.
Mhm.
So before it was just random. You had C, VS, V comes after C,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now if I do search order by search type, it'll first order by C, and then the rest will however the database has it. But I can do like if I wanted to, first order by search type, then search order by address number if I wanted to. Okay. Now this data is probably going to take a long time to run, so
You have to limit
I'm going to limit it.
each 10.
Okay. But my point is I don't want to show that part yet. Okay.
Okay, I
I
understand.
want to show a certain point. Okay. So for the data sequencing, just know that you can set it up right away, or in the wizard, or you can right click and define your data sequencing, and you can move this up and down and whatever, however you want to sequence your stuff.
Yeah, I would. If you want to get Lancer, I think you have to do it backward,
What backward?
like the not the C, the other one. Oh, but it's
Oh,
not big enough.
descending. Yeah, you can do that as well, but I'll show you that after.
Okay.
Okay. Um, what I want to show right now is data selection.
Mhm.
So you saw when I run the report, right now there's no data select. When I look at define data selection, there's no data selection on the report.
Yeah.
When I run the report and I choose data selection, there's no data selection defaulted,
Yeah.
but it allows me to put a where and to choose any column that's in my business view and put a filter on that column. If you put a data selection on a report, it's the default data selection.
Mhm.
So if I say a lot of times, you'll say, let's say search type
Okay, it's the default
is
one.
equal to, let's say C.
So it's gonna be called in any version that you create.
In any version, because yes.
Okay.
You could have a default in the report that applies as the default on all the versions. You could also override the version to have its own default if you want.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so you can say this version defaulted to search type C, this version defaulted to E.
Okay.
Okay, so, but the way it works is the first it's the batch application has a default, and
Uh-huh.
that default applies to your versions.
Uh-huh.
Then the versions you can override the default, and then the user can then override that default
The default of the
of the
version.
version. Yeah.
Okay.
So the user gets its default from the version gets its default from the batch application.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and at every level it's overridable.
Uh-huh.
So right now I just put it there. Okay, so now when I run this, you see I have a default.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. I understand.
so I have a default, but the user can change it. They can put C, they can put D, they can put list, they can even delete it if they want.
Oh, you can over.
I
Okay.
can do whatever I want. Now there's security that you can put on this stuff so that users don't. Sometimes you want to make sure there's certain data selection on your report. A lot of times you want to make sure.
Uh-huh.
Um, so you put there's different methods of doing that. One is through security. It's the most flexible way of doing it. It's through security. So you can say they can change this, but they can't delete the line. They can't even change it. Period. You
Uh-huh.
can't change the line. They can't add new records.
Uh-huh.
You can do all of that through security. What you can do at the report level is you could right click advanced and put locked.
Uh-huh.
But once it's locked, if you do it this way, it's locked. You cannot change that through security. It's locked and it's locked for everybody.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so what that'll
How do
do,
you lock it?
you just right click advanced and there's a locked.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so now when you see that thing there, that little lock,
Yeah.
if I try and run this, it's locked. I can't change it. Can't change it.
Oh.
Can't delete it. I can't change it. It's locked.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay, so usually what you do, I very rarely lock it.
Uh-huh.
I will more often than not use security because security you can accomplish the same thing but be more flexible about it.
Uh-huh.
Um, but if I'm 100% sure that this thing will never, ever, ever change and cannot change, I might lock it.
Uh-huh.
But usually I favor security over this because security you can say lock it for this guy but don't lock it for that guy,
Uh-huh.
right? And sometimes IT we don't want it locked but we want everybody else locked,
Yeah.
so we do it usually through security. Okay, so that's data selection. Um, I'm going to remove the lock. And then I'll go back to data sequencing. Okay, so for data sequencing, you specify how you want it sequenced, and in the define sort properties is where you just say the sort order.
Uh-huh.
So that's ascending, that's descending. Remember you were saying
Yeah.
ascending versus descending?
Yeah.
That's where you do it.
Yeah.
Then you can also define level break parameters. Level break parameters are good for, let me show you what a break is, okay? A break is this. Let me do a simple one. Let me say define data sequence. This is level break. Okay, let me insert in here a break section. So when I create a section, I can have a level break header
Uh-huh.
or a level break footer.
Uh-huh.
A level break Okay, and this is not just for JDE. Where's your? Hang on, I need Excel. This is for any reporting environment that goes to a database to get some data. Every single tool I've ever worked with for reporting have the concept of a level break.
Okay.
Level break is this. Okay, runs through some data, right?
Yes.
Display this, display this, display this. Oh, something changed. You
Mm-hmm.
have to define
Okay.
the field or fields that you want to trigger a break. Right now, I've said in here, in my data sequencing, that this field alone triggers a level break.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the level break, again, that's why I said that a level break is tied to the way you sequence things. Because it doesn't make sense putting a break on something if you're not sequencing by it. Because when you're breaking, what it means is it's changing. Something is changing. So I'm putting a level break on here, meaning that I want to be notified when this value changes to a different value. So if it's the same as the previous value, don't do anything. It's not a break. When it changes, right here, from here to here is a break. From here to here is a break.
So prior to breaking, we have to sort them in categories.
Sort them the same way that you want to break. Yes.
The same way you want to break. Because
Yeah.
you don't want to go from
One back to the other,
the
back to another. Exactly.
randomly.
Exactly.
There is no point in
There's
breaking.
usually no. Usually you don't want to do that. So an example would be, let's say you'd had. You know what? I'm gonna do an example right now. I'm gonna display the number of customers. Let's say they have a report. They want to display all their clients, but they want to break it down by category. And they
Yeah.
want to know the number of clients they have in each category.
Mm-hmm.
What I could do is I could have a break section, okay, to say when this finishes processing, show me the number of records that I processed.
Okay.
When this finishes processing, show me the number of these records that I processed.
Mm-hmm.
So I can create a break section for that, okay? And you don't have to create a break section to generate a break. Okay, you can have some logic on a break without creating a section or some output for it. But in this
Okay.
particular example, I'm just going to show you.
Okay.
I'm going to show you a break section. Okay, so I'm sorting by address type 1. My next level of sequence is going to be address number. But I'm not breaking on this, I'm just breaking on this. How do I know that? Here, I'm breaking on this. So then I can create inside my section. I select the section that I want to create the break for. I go to section and I create either a header or a footer. Header, it's header is going to appear here before this record,
Mm-hmm.
before this record,
Mm-hmm.
before this record. Footer is going to appear after this record, after this record, and after this record.
Okay.
So sometimes you want before, sometimes you want after, sometimes you have both. Sometimes you have like list of customers, list of my customers, total count, 3. List of employees, list your employees, total count, 10.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so actually, you know what? Let's do that. We'll create a, first we'll create a level break footer. It asks, do you want a group or a columnar section?
Mm-hmm.
You can have this a group and your subsection, or sorry, your level break a columnar.
Mm-hmm.
But again, my suggestion is I always do group.
Okay.
Always do group because I can always accomplish everything the same way. So Um, let's. A lot of times you can break on anything, but most of the time you want to only break on the existing sort columns. I'm going to choose this. I want to break on this column. I will not explain this for now. This is automatic stuff. You can automatically do some totaling. If you have some number fields in here, some amounts,
Yeah.
some numbers, the runtime will automatically summarize and it'll do that type of thing for you. I'm not gonna. Me, I usually code it myself. So it names it on search type. You can name it whatever you want. Okay, you can override the name, but on search type, do something. So let's set up a variable and count the number of records, and then we're going to display it here. So for that, usually what I do is I'm going to say int 01. I'm going to say customer count, and going to be a report variable.
Yeah.
I'm going to initialize in the initialize section, customer count to 0. In the do section, I'm going to start counting them. Customer count equals customer count plus 1.
Mm-hmm.
So every time a record processes, I'm incrementing that variable.
We don't want. Are we gonna display them now?
Yeah, I'm going to split.
Okay.
Here, I'm going to add a data dictionary column in 01, and I'm going to call it total count. I'm going to put it there, and I'm going to, in here, in the do section. Now that do section is slightly different than that do section. In that do section will process for the break itself, not for every record, for the break.
Okay.
Okay? And something that's particular about this section
Yeah.
is that the value the value the record processes here. No, here. Here. So here you have a break. Here you have a break. And here you have a break because that's a level break footer.
Mm-hmm.
So you have your do section. So this is here. Let me actually put it over here. You have a do, break. Now in the break section, you're doing the do section of the break, but it's processing one record.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's not processing one record, it's processing the break itself. Now to get access to the the this, it's PC, not BC.
Mm-hmm.
PC is previous column.
Mm-hmm.
So remember you saw over here BC?
Yes.
So in a normal section, BC is what you're going to use. But you also have the previous column. Okay? And JDE will manage that in even in a regular do section. So JDE will do this. You have address, number, search type, event type, BC, PC. Okay, I'm gonna say BC address number, BC search type. I'm gonna say this is what JDE is gonna do. Oh,
Okay. In order to trigger the the breakpoint, you have to compare to the previous one.
yeah. Well, you don't have to. Well, let me show you. Okay, so this is what JDE is doing.
Oh.
It's managing the previous column and the current column.
Uh-huh.
In a regular section, in a regular do section, the the first record I process is not going to have a previous column.
Yes.
The second record I process, the variable 456 and C, this is the data I'm processing.
Yeah.
It's going to have those variables. But the previous is the previous column that I had.
Yes.
Same thing for the next record. This is the current record, that's the previous record. By the time you get to the break section, the BC is the next section, the next one.
Uh-huh.
But if you want to refer to data that you have previously processed,
Uh-huh.
you got to refer to the previous column in that section.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of times you're going to say total number of C. Well, C, if I want to get C, I got to use the previous column in this section. So this is how JDE is going to how JDE is going to work with it. Okay. So let me show you what I mean by that. Back here. Total count first. I'm not going to use previous column. I'm just going to put the total count in there. So I'm going to go RV integer 1, set it to count. And I'm going to just name this count. Let's do E and stuff we have not many of. Here, buyers and employees. You know what? Let me I'll do those ones. I'm gonna put that online. Let me do facilities and freight carrier. And let me do one more. Third party. Okay, so I'm running off 3
Yeah.
types.
Yes.
I'm gonna run that, export to CSV. Okay, now look what it did. Listed all my facilities. Total count 13. Listed all my freight carriers. At the end of the freight carrier, list the count. Now, there's a problem with this code. I forgot to do something. My variable is a report variable. Look, Is there 97 of these things?
Yeah.
I didn't reinitialize.
Okay.
So let me fix that. First display it, then set it back to 0.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that the next time it runs, it's good. Run that again. Actually, I'm gonna just set the default so I don't have to set it all the time. Did FC, FC3, and F. F. Okay, run that. Ah, I didn't do a CSV, but you get
Yeah.
my point. So do section, do section, do section, do section, do section. Oh, once it gets here,
Mm-hmm.
it compares. Is the value? You know what? Let me run it. Let me do the X. Let me do it this way.
Yeah. So now you have it by the default.
Okay. Do section, do section, do section, do section. It gets to this section here. It's about to do the do. It compares because I put a break
Mm-hmm.
on this and this.
Mm-hmm.
So because I put a break on these two things, on this column, it compares the two columns. So did they change? Yes. Okay. Is there a break defined?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Trigger that break. Trigger that section to run. That section runs and outputs whatever I put on that section. So it's then going to populate that with the count. Then it reinitializes that variable and starts the next do, the do section. It continues the do. That's level break footer. And let me show you, if I display here RVA, you know what? I'm going to do it this way. Okay, so on top of showing the count, just to illustrate what is shown where, I'm going to show you what value exists in the BC versus the BC, sorry, the BC versus the PC when I get to a level break. Okay, now look uh, at the difference. I'm at the level break footer. This footer is meant for this section. For not this section, this set of data,
Yes.
right? Because this is the whole section here.
Yes.
I'm putting a footer when this changes, when the search type changes. If I look at the value of the BC, it's the next one it's going to process.
Ah, okay, okay, okay.
When I look at the value of what it was before, the PC. It's the last one it processed. Now, this I would never use here, but let me show you what I will use. Okay, before I was showing you address numbers. Doesn't make sense to 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 actually show a variable of an address number on there because the footer doesn't apply to one address number. The footer applies to all the address numbers that you applied. The footer is applying to is the search type. So sometimes you might want to say total count for C type. Okay, so it makes sense to have variables or display things in here that are based on the break. And search type is what I'm breaking on. So here, let me do this first. I'm going to say BC is equal to BC address type. Ah, I added the wrong thing here. Hang on. I added it from here. I need to add it from here. It's the data dictionary I added from, not the business view. Okay, so what I put in the variable BC is the search type of the business column, the current one, and this is the previous column. So this will make more sense. So BC, this count is not for FC. This count is for the Fs. So a lot of times in your report, I'm not gonna say total count of FC.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say total count of F is the previous column. So a lot of times in your breaks, in your level break footers, your footers, if you want to refer to the data that you're actually summarizing here, you're gonna not use the BC values to do that. You're gonna use the PC values to do that.
Okay.
Right? That's a very important point that it still screws me up today. I still by habit I choose BC, but then I realize after I test and shit, I took the wrong one. Right?
So basically, the break belongs to the next section.
If it's a footer, okay, the break belongs to the data that was just processed, the previous data that was processed. If it's a level break header, then it's different. The header goes here before the data is processed. And that one you can use BC. I'll show you. So normally you would do this. Okay, I wouldn't do this. I would just say something like this. Actually, I'll do it this way. Total count of C. And I'll put the previous column in there. Okay. So I'll do something like this. And total count of F, 13. Total count of FC, 81. So I'm using I'm using this. I'm using actually this actual record right here. But because I know that I'm sequencing and they're all grouped together and I put a break on it, I know that every single one of these are FC.
Yeah. Where's the break again? How did you put the break?
The break you do on the section itself, not here. Here, first you define the sequencing.
Yes.
Then in the sort properties, you specify there's a
Okay.
level break.
On that sequence.
On that, and then in the actual section itself, you say what column you're breaking on. Okay, and I'll show you the difference. Right now, there's no difference. Right now, I don't need to do this.
Yes.
I can still break on it.
How?
Okay,
Does it break?
I'll show you. Oh, now I don't know which one it is. Oh, here we go. Oh, no, see, no, I can't even do it. I have to do it. I have to, in order to initiate, that's right. In order to initiate the break, I need to tell it which column I'm breaking on. Here.
And do something with it.
So I have to say what my level breaks are. Okay, but you can, the difference comes when you're breaking on multiple columns. Okay, and I'll get into that another time. Yeah, so you have to have your level break defined here on the column, and then here in the section you define what call the same break. So if it's just one column, it's the same one. It's it's weird that you're doing it in two places right now because you're doing it on one column, but when you do it on multiple columns, you'll see why you have to define it in both sections. Okay, because you can have like multiple levels of break. You can have breaks within breaks, right? You can say first break on, like in the example here, I could first break on this and then second break on this.
Yeah.
Right? I could break 5 times if I want on different columns. I could say when this changes, do this. When this changes, do this. Okay, and you'll see. I don't want to get into it now because it's a little more complex, but you'll see that there's a good reason why you have to define it here and here, and there's a particularity with how you define it. Sorry, here.
But this one, this break is within this one.
Yes, but this is where you define the this is within this one.
In here.
Yeah.
Anyway.
You'll see. You'll see. Okay. So that's level break footer. Level break header is the exact same thing, except you're triggering it. See, same thing, defining it the exact same way, except that this is going to display before, this is going to display after. Even though you see it here,
Yeah, yeah.
it doesn't matter. It'll going to get processed before. I can move it up. I can
So
like.
we should name it.
So you should name it, yeah, like header,
Breaking
footer,
footer
I know that's a level break footer and a level break header because you see the break in the page there.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so I don't really name it that way as a header footer. I know it's inside of this section. All right, I know it's not a page header because a page header is not inside of this thing. Um, so I mean, you can call it whatever you want to call it to make it easier to you, but I'll call that header. I'll call that footer. And the difference, okay, is that here I'm gonna say here in the header when you're here. Let me go back over here. When you're over here, okay. So the difference here is that before even processing this record, I'm gonna have a header break. The value that I'm gonna be using is the values to come, not the values that were processed, the values that are about to be processed. Yeah, because you're breaking before the header, before the data. Okay, let me show you in on screen first so that you see here. Let me do the same thing I did before. Here, I'm gonna have the BC. Okay, so I'm doing the same thing, but instead of being in a footer section, I'm in a header section. So, okay, so you see, before this data even processes, I'm gonna output a header for it. The header doesn't have any previous columns because there was no previous columns there's no data processed before this. It's the first time I'm processing this. My my BC contains the BC that I'm about to process. Same thing here now. Except that now I've had some data that I've already processed. So my previous column was this. But my current column is this one. So when you're working in a header section, you're going to work with the BC, not the PC. When you're working in a footer section, usually you're working with the PC and not the BC. So that's the difference between the header is like header processes before. That's header. So it still happens on breaks. The break is Here there is no there is it's like there's no break because nothing has changed, but it's like you're going from the very first record you process is gonna have a break on it. Okay. Now the data changes. So before processing this record, okay, not after processing this record. That's the footer. Before processing this record, issue a break, a header break. So do it before you start processing this stuff. It already knows the next value. Yes, it always compares. If you always look at the BC and the PC, that's how it knows. It's about to process this record. It's about to process it.
But that record is in memory.
It's in memory. It's in BC. See, it's in BC. Even while I'm in the section, it's in BC. So it compares and says, oh, it's changed. Initiate a header, level break header. Oh, it's changed. Initiate level break footer if you define the footer. But if you want to get access to the values, this is before, header is before, footer is after. So knowing that, if you're in a header, you're going to want to display values that are about to come. So you're going to use the BC. If you're in a footer, you want to display values that you've already processed. So you're going to show the PC. And again, it's going to have a BC and a PC for every single column, okay, that you have in your business view. What's important is that usually what you're doing in a level break header and a level break footer is you're showing values that are common to that section. I'm not going to put BC or PC address number because it doesn't make sense. Does it make sense to show 999999933 over here in the level break footer? No, because this whole this data, what's common about it is the F is what I'm breaking on. So show the break columns here. So like total of F, that makes sense. Or here I can say processing F, process the F, total count for F, right?
It's only at the end that you know how many they will process.
Yes, you can't do it beforehand. You can't count beforehand. You have to, yeah, you wouldn't know it in the header.
The header is just to, I don't know, to say, well.
Or you can have a header section that says like SF marketing, some data for SF marketing. Another company, some data for another company, right? You can have a customer, the sales of that customer. Customer, the sales of that customer. Just to say this is what I'm processing now, right? So that's kind of like the difference between a level break header and a level break footer. And I think I might stop there. Hang on. You know what? I'm going to do one more thing, and then I'm going to stop there. So when you have a section, this is a normal section. Within that section, you could put breaks. Within any normal section, you could put breaks. I can add another section to this report, another regular section. Choose a business view. And it doesn't have to be the same. It could be a different business view. So right now I'm just choosing any one. I'm just selecting one. Now I have two sections in this report. This one and this one. Okay. This one's going to process first.
Okay.
This one's going to process second.
Top to bottom.
Yes. Now you're looking at the regular sections. Okay.
Yeah.
Top to bottom.
Okay.
When this processes, these are going to process within it.
Yes.
Then it jumps to the next one. Process this. If I could have level break headers and level break footers on this section if I want. I can only have level break header, level break footer. I'm not going to get into that one now. So the types of sections that you could have within a section are header, level break footer, and subsection join. A subsection join is for records that you process. Go and grab data in another table related to that header. So for example, a subsection join here could be sales for customers. the detailed lines of sales for customers. So here on the section, for every do section, I'm processing a customer, one customer. I can have a subsection join that says process the customer, then go to another table and grab all the sales for that customer and show me the sales for the customer. That's what a subsection join would do. So I'm going to create a subsection join. I'm going to create it on F4V554211. This is the sales file. Okay, so these are open sales. I'm going to create open sales. It might be none. Okay, because I don't want to show all of the sales. I'm just to limit it. I'm going to show it's open sales. Okay, one of the things says define the join between the two tables now. So the join is going to be what table in 4211. So the table that has the ship to. Okay, there's a column in 4211. 4211 is the sales file. The sales file, when you make a sale, it has the ship to number, which is an address book number, of the customer placing the order. So it's like a foreign key. So you can look at it. You can look at it like this. This has AN8, which is the address number. It's got a bunch of other stuff. Search type, which is AT1, right? It's got the name, blah, blah, blah. Right, those are the columns, that's the table name. This is the sales detail. It's got DOCO, which is the order number. It's got the price. Okay, I'm not going to list all of what they are, but it's got price, it's got quantity, it's got item, short item, and it's got ship to, which is SHAN. Now, JDE, again, remember what I was saying, that in the database itself, there's no foreign keys. But logically, there's a foreign key here. Logically, that ship to is an address book number. So the foreign key looks like this. I don't know how do I do it.
It's right there. You point to.
Foreign key looks like this. Right? If I was designing this from scratch in my own database, I would have this be a foreign key to this. JDE doesn't have that. But in logically and in the code, that's exactly what it is. It's just not enforced in the database. But it's there, right? The relationship of the data is there. It's the same. Same thing for this short item number. Short item number is a foreign key to F4101, which is the item master. That has a bunch of attributes about an item. So when I do a subsection join, what I'm going to be doing is my first section is a section that goes through all the address numbers.
Okay.
Then for each address number, go and grab the sales details that are linked to that customer. Okay, so that's what a subsection join is going to do. So you have to define the join. So you're defining the relationship between the tables, basically. So here I'm going to say, first it's going to say the 2. So 4211 is the ship to. It's address number ship to. This one here. Parent is F0101, address number. So I'm defining the relationship between the two tables now. Now what that's going to do is it's going to process this section for every one of these sections. So for every customer, I'm going to list the open sales. So in here now, I can show, let's say, like the sales order number. And I don't know, I'm just going to keep it simple, the line number. And let's say the price. Okay, so it's going to be an ugly report, okay? But I just wanted to illustrate what it's doing. I have to show customers. So I'm just going to do I'll do 3 customers. I don't even know if there are any open sales, but let's see. Yeah, it's running. And I didn't choose CSV.
You didn't?
No, I forgot. Oh man, one of them are probably big. Oh yeah. I'll let it run for a bit longer and see if I have to kill it or not.
So
Ah, man. It's probably pretty big. What the heck? I'm gonna kill it. It's too much.
you have to restrict it. And we need listeners to subscribe if they want more videos.
Go log in. I'm gonna do something here. I'm not gonna explain it for now,
Yeah.
just to limit it. picked our big customers. It's the ones I tested all the time.
Do?
Okay. It's gonna take too long to run, but
Anyway.
what I wanna point out is that a subsection join is like it's show it in an Excel document. First you have your first section.
Yeah.
For every section, it then spawns a new section.
Mm-hmm.
And it spawns the section. So this section is going to be based on F, for example, 0101. The next one is going to show like order number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Line number 1. Amount, let's say $10. Order 1, 2, 3, 8, 9. Line number 1, $20. And you have like a bunch of these. Say line number 2. Say this one doesn't have any, and let's say this one has, let's say, one order. So let's say that you have, this is at 4211. So if you don't have a subsection join, you're going to process 1, 2, 3 records. Let's say I select 3 customers. It'll process 3 records. If I do have a subsection join, it will still process those records, but you create a subsection within each with each record. And what it'll do now is it'll join based on the definition of the join that you specified. And it'll process every single record related to that join. So in this scenario, because I joined based on the ship to, it's giving me it's limiting the join
Yeah.
to this customer. So it's going to show the sales. Okay, hang on, do I have it here? In this case, I only chose 1. There is no open orders for this. There's only an open order for this. Okay, I chose 5068 and 5067.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at this, my do, forget this because these are now it's getting confusing because I have all these sections everywhere. Let's get rid of this. So forget the header and forget the footer. This is what I'm concentrating on now. I, in my data selection, selected only 2 records.
Yes.
In those 2 records,
Yes.
it processed them just like it would have normally processed. I added a subsection join to say, show me the open orders. So join on the F4211
Yes.
based on this address number in that file.
Yes.
So what it does is it processes this record,
Yes.
then it goes to 4211 for this record, and it filters 4211 based on this address number to see if there's any open sales in that file. If there are, it's going to list them. It's gonna list them because I'm listing them,
I understand.
but it's gonna process them. It doesn't mean I don't have to output it.
No.
It's gonna run a do section for every single thing that it joins. If there's nothing, there's nothing. In this case, 5068 didn't find anything.
Okay.
Process the next one in the do.
I understand.
It did 5069. Now it found one record, so it displayed what I'm displaying.
Gotcha.
Okay, but it doesn't have to display. I don't have to display anything here. I could write some do section here if I want, some code to run there if I want. Okay, it's the point is that What this is doing is just setting up a relationship, processing one record, and then it's like a header and detail, right? Like parent detail. This is the parent record. Now process some detail records for that. So you can have like sales order header, sales order detail as a subsection join. Now most of the time in many of the reports that I've built, I don't really find that much of a need.
It's very consuming, right? Resource consuming.
Yes, but locally it's a lot slower than on our server. Our server is a lot more power and it'll run a lot faster. Okay, but generally I don't use it very often. I don't find the need to. I have used it and I do still use it. I don't suggest you don't use it. You just use it when you need to use it. I find that more often than not, I can get all my stuff accomplished by a regular do section, a header or a footer if I need them, um, and what they call conditional sections. Okay, and I don't normally have this. I have this. I've built over 100 reports here, probably over 200 reports. Um, I've probably used it 5 times, maybe. Okay, but they're still useful, and certain circumstances calls for it. Last thing I'm going to show, okay, is the concept of a conditional section.
Yes.
So you can create a section here.
So basically, most of the time you use one view. You constrain.
No, I have not necessarily, not necessarily.
I understand.
But most of the time I don't use subsection joins.
Nice.
Okay, I might accomplish this a completely different way. Um, I'm the type of person, okay, my preference is to have control over the code. So when I design my report or design my sections, I design it in a way that I can change it easily in the future. And the way that you can design, the only way you can really design it that way is if you don't, not only that it can change, but that I have full control over it. When you let the runtime do things for you, you have little, it's faster, but you have little less control over it. Whereas if I write the code to do it myself, I'm gonna have more control over what I can get, when I trigger it. This gets triggered always at the same time. I can't say only trigger this subsection join if it's a customer, or some sort of conditional logic of when to trigger this. You could, but I'm the type of person that I'm gonna design it in a way that I have the most control over my code. It's more time consuming, but it's just the way, it's my coding style. It's the way I am. Some people will say, hey, well, you're wasting your time. But me, I like to program with control and flexibility. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is conditional sections. Conditional sections, if you highlight the properties of a section and you go advanced and you create, say, conditional, it puts a C on that. Now this section will not get executed. So before, what I just said about this section goes first, this section goes second, the sections that are non-conditional, they process. Okay. The conditional sections, you have to, in your code, call those sections. So and that's why they're called conditional, because usually what you do is in your code, you have some sort of if, or you have some sort of event, and you trigger this to start running on an event. So you can say, like, I don't know, if something, and then there's a system function, section, do custom section. And then you say, trigger it. Okay? So I won't go into the details of, like, because this is very, very powerful. I use this all the time. You see it all the time. Okay? But in order for you to really see this, I'm going to have to do another video on, like, some of the code. Because I didn't really get into much code right now. I just got into what are the types of sections, how are they triggered, how are they linked, right? Um, but when you start getting into more of the event rule code that you write in a function and how you do data selection and data selections for different sections, you'll see the power of conditional sections. And just like I was saying before, of subsection join, I will probably implement that as a custom section then rather than than this. And I would call the code myself on every do section. Call this section and pass in some filters for that section. It just gives me more control. Um, Last thing I'm going to mention is that every section has data selection. Okay, not this, not the header, but this section, it's got some data selection. This section, it's got some data selection. Subsection join, it's got some data selection.
The default ones.
No, let me explain. Every section, if it's not the first section, the user does not have access. What the user sees here, here is the first section, the first non-conditional section. That's what they have control over. Everything else in here, they do not have access to.
So they have access to the data selection of the entry point of the non.
Of the entry point of the entry point, and the entry point is the first non-conditional section in a report.
Okay. So the header.
Not the header, sorry. Not the first regular section, these ones.
Okay.
First one of these.
I understand.
Not a header or a footer or any of that special types of sections. First one of these.
This is super important.
Okay? So they have access to modify that. The rest, you do as a developer. You can do it in the interface or you can do it in code. And a lot of times when you have multiple sections, sometimes when not as a fetch, there's a system function to do filtering or to do data selection. So a lot of time what you're doing is normally you're setting up like other sections in the report that are dependent on some data here. You're setting some variables and then you're calling those sections and you're filtering those sections based on the variables that you've set. Right? So even though the user doesn't have complete control over it, it kind of like you code it in such a way that they select here, and then based on the data here, the rest of the stuff get data selected appropriately, right? So that's what I just wanted to mention was that every section, every regular section, has got its own sequencing, its own data selection that you can place on it, but the user can only interact with the first section of the report. And this is not the first section of the report. It's conditional. Okay, so when I run this and I do data selection, I see the same data selection. Why? It's this one. Why? Because this one's conditional.
Oh yeah, conditional is never the first.
It's the first non-conditional section that they'll be able to see. Okay, so recap on the section processing. In order. Okay, this one here is going to process this section first, this section second. It's not going to process this section unless I call it and when I call it.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because it's conditional. It's not going to process.
Okay.
Only if I call it will it process.
So top to bottom.
Top to bottom, ignore the conditional. Okay? So a lot of times you'll see things like this, right? See like a ton of conditional sections all over the place.
Usually you group them at the bottom, or you just put them where they.
I put them if it's a super complex UBE. I might put them where they're related to, like it's this one and I call from there, this one I call from here. But It's usually I name them in such a way that I know what's going on. Okay. But you could see something like this and you might think like, well, okay, it's going to process this, then it's going to process this. It's not what's going to happen. So you have to go, what's the entry point? And normally, to be honest, you don't have two sections. 99.99999% of the time, you have one section. Okay? Which is the entry point. You may have a bunch of conditional sections. Okay? But you're not going to have two sections that process one after another. You have one business view and your data runs on that one business view, and you call some other sections that are conditional. You might have some headers in there, you might have some subsection joins in there, but you're not going to have run the address book, run this, because it doesn't usually make sense. Okay? I think in one, maybe two reports, I did that. And I don't even know if I did that. I have to go back and maybe I didn't even do that. Maybe I did conditional. Okay? So a lot of times you're going to see something like this normally. You can have one section here and a ton of conditional sections down there. And when I first started programming, I was like, what order does this stuff process, right? I was like breaking my head, like saying, like I have this over here and this over here, but this didn't get processed, and I'd see only this data like later in the code. Oh, I had to read I don't know, it took me a while. I had to read some stuff. And so when I started off, I didn't do conditional sections. When I started off, I just did like the basic stuff.
That's exactly because I went through the material and I had no idea which one first.
Yeah, okay.
And I knew that it's going to take me, before this video, I knew it's going to take me weeks.
Yeah.
Before
yeah, so you need to, so basically,
but it's pretty simple.
It's pretty simple, okay? You got regular, so just as a recap, you got regular sections. These are your regular sections. You can either do a group, a columnar, tabular. I didn't really talk much about, okay? This runs exactly the same way. You have a set of data in a business view. You assign a business view to that section. It will have events in that section that process before, for every record, and after. Okay? In those sections, you can have level break headers and level break footers. So you can define sequencing for each of those sections, and you can define level breaks for each of those sections, for each of those, those sections. You can add as many sections as you want. The UBE is going to process section 1 first, section 2 second, section 3 third. Okay? If you set it as a conditional section, it will not process unless you call that section. 99.99% of the time, you're going to have one regular section in your report with a bunch of conditional sections. You're going to have maybe some level break headers and some footers, and you're going to call those sections based on data that you're working with. So you're going to have some report variables that is going to, for example, in this scenario, if I wanted to accomplish this, if I wanted to accomplish a subsection join, I could set this section here to F4211, and in my do section, I can call this section and filter by the exact same thing I'm filtering here. I can say where address number shipped to is equal to, and I would just set a variable over here. I would set a report variable. Here, I would have a report variable called ship to number. I would set the ship to number here. I would call the section called sales, and in the sales section, I can filter my data selection based on that variable. So I can say where ship to is equal to my variable. So whatever variable is in there, when I call this section, is getting filtered. And I have control on when I can call that section. So a lot of times you're going to have conditional sections that you call and that you apply programmatically some data selection to them. So that was a long one, but it gives you an idea of how the UBE runtime works. And I didn't get into any code. I had very little code I got into. Okay, so the next one I do, I'll do it more of the code.